Good morning, everyone, and welcome to DEI Deathwatch, the digest show that covers the disintegration and the doubling down of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the world, as everything is ramped up in the last couple of months. Hope everybody's doing well on this beautiful Monday morning. Before I get into today's stories, who's joining me on this beautiful Monday morning? Morgan King, good morning. Captain Fandom Nerd, good morning. Keeverdam, good morning, and thank you, Keeverdam, for providing the link to the Give, Send, Go for Chad and his family. Guys, Chad and his family are being forced out of their home, and they need a little assistance to try to avoid becoming homeless. If you guys can take a look at that fundraiser when you have the opportunity, if you are able to donate, please do so. But even if you can't, if you can share that out on social media, that would be appreciated. So thank you ahead of time for that. And thank you, Keeverdam, for providing the link. Josh Hammond, good morning. Snorted Poopus Cuber. Snorted Poopus Community. Good morning. Who else is here? Anybody else? Luke Skywalker 2, good morning. Hero Soldier, hello. Funtime Bats, hello. Shady Grin, good morning. Mike Savage, Blard. Advocatus Diaboli, good morning. Attack Alpaca, good morning to you. And let's see, I think that's everybody. If I missed you, if you're lurking, if you're in the future. Oh, there you go. Robert Pincus, good morning. And if I missed you, if you're lurking. Oh, and there's also Midnight's Edge After Dark. That would probably be a Tom Connors. Good morning again, Tom Connors. So we got a lot of stories today. Let's get into them. A lot of stuff going on in the wonderful world of DEI. Let's start off with the New York Public Schools. The New York Public Schools, a subject I have covered a little bit in my channel's history. Long ago, and I'll put the link to that video in the chat now for those of you that are curious. I covered the former chancellor of New York Public Schools, Richard Carranza, and his wonderful plan to bring courageous conversations and diversity and inclusion into New York Public Schools. That didn't go so well for him once the lawsuits started rolling in. That's a whole other story I've covered in the past, but a video to part of that is in the chat now. And also, Miranda Stone is here. Well, you guys know about Miranda Stone, don't you? Well, if you don't, let me tell you. Oh, and also John Traxon is here. Kelly Hans, good morning. But yeah, so New York Public Schools. New York Public Schools tell Trump administration they won't comply with DEI order. Now, if you don't know, there is a threat out there from the Trump administration that public schools that do not divest themselves of their DEI programs and such within 10 days after last Thursday, that is, they would risk losing federal funding. Apparently, all New York public schools are resisting. New York state officials have told the Trump administration that they will not comply with its demands to end diversity, equity, and inclusion practices in public schools, despite the administration's threats to terminate federal education funding. Daniel Morton Bentley, counsel and deputy commissioner of the State Department of Education, said in a letter Friday to the Federal Education Department that state officials do not believe the federal agency has authority to make such demands. Quote, "We understand that the current administration seeks to censor anything it deems diversity, equity, and inclusion," he wrote, "but there are no federal or state laws prohibiting the principles of DEI." Well, let me correct you right there, Mr. Morton Bentley. Title VI. I still haven't done it. I really need to do it. I need to have an overlay that is just the text of Title VI. You are not allowed under Title VI, if you accept federal funding, to have any program or activity that discriminates on the basis of race or sex. If you do, you risk forfeiting that federal funding. That is the long, that is the short. Are you a public school in New York? Do you accept federal funding in any measure? If the answer is yes, any program cannot discriminate on the basis of race or sex. As long as your schools don't have any of those things, then you're fine. Unfortunately, DEI essentially requires you to do that. So, if you're being accurate, there are no federal or state laws prohibiting the principles of DEI. You're wrong. 100% wrong. Unless you've decided, as I imagine you have, to redefine what DEI is in your own mind. Morton Bentley also writes state officials were unaware of any authority the Federal Department of Education has to demand that states agree with its interpretation of court decisions or to terminate funding without a formal administrative process. The U.S. Department of Education did not immediately respond to email requests for comment. The Trump administration on Thursday ordered K through 12 schools nationwide to certify within 10 days that they are following federal civil rights laws and ending any discriminatory DEI practices as a condition for receiving federal money. Again, this has been there for a long time now. It's called Title VI. Federal funding comprises about 6% of the total funding for New York K through 12 schools. Quote, federal financial assistance is a privilege, not a right, unquote, Craig Traynor, acting assistant secretary for civil rights, said in a statement when the demand was made. He said many schools have flouted their legal obligations, quote, including by using DEI programs to discriminate against one group of Americans to favor another, unquote. The certification demand asked state and school leaders to sign a, quote, reminder of legal obligations, unquote, acknowledging that federal money is conditioned on compliance with federal civil rights laws, which is true and has been since '64. It also demands compliance with several pages of legal analysis written by the administration. The demand specifically threatens Title I funding, which sends billions of dollars a year to America's schools and targets low-income areas. Morton Bentley wrote that the state education department has already certified to the federal government on multiple occasions that it is complying with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, most recently in January. He said the federal department is basing its demands to end DEI programs on a faulty legal interpretation. Well, here's the thing. If you want to call whatever you're doing DEI, that's fine, as long as none of it discriminates on the basis of race or sex, particularly. Okay? Now, again, if you take a look at that video, and I'll put the link in the chat again for those of you that don't know, New York Public Schools has had a long and very expensive track record of implementing programs and activities that explicitly discriminate on the basis of race and sex. So, as long as you're not doing those things, if you're ready to be audited, then go ahead. Quote, given the fact that you are already in possession of guarantees by New York's state education that it has and will comply with Title VI, no further certification will be forthcoming, he wrote. Well, prepare for an audit. He also said the administration's stance is an abrupt shift from the one taken by the first Trump administration, citing comments in 2020 made by then U.S. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos that diversity and inclusion were, quote, cornerstones of high organizational performance, unquote. He wrote the administration has provided no explanation of why it changed positions. Well, why do you need an explanation? It's been there under Title. If you're adhering to Title VI, and you have been this entire time, which means that the stories that I looked at, the consultants that you hired, all the lawsuits that you faced for racial discrimination in your departments, all that stuff didn't actually happen. I'm not quite sure what your issue is. If you've done nothing wrong, then I guess there's no reason to fear your federal funding will be taken away. If you want to continue using DEI as a cover story for what you're doing, prepare for an audit. Critics of the certification demand said it conflicted with Trump's promise to return education to schools and states. Yes, education, not indoctrination, and not programs that flagrantly violate Title VI. That's the issue. The threat of financial sanctions is similar to ones the Trump administration has been leveraging against colleges in its effort to crack down on protests against Israel that it deems anti-Semitic. That it deems anti-Semitic? That's an interesting segue. You mean aside from all the idiots running through the streets screaming, from the river to the sea? You know, because only the Trump administration could deem that anti-Semitic, I guess. New York State has similarly refused to comply with the demand by the Trump administration to shut down a program to fund mass transit in New York City with high tolls on cars that drive into Manhattan. Because obviously the opposition to anti-Semitic protests on campuses and tolls on cars is directly related to DEI in education. Thank you, CNN, for always giving us the most relatable and relevant facts to a story and its surrounds. But there you go. Yes, defiance from New York Public Schools. We're not doing anything wrong. We comply with Title VI. Never mind all those times that we haven't. Never mind all those programs. They spent the upwards of $1 million on 2 different consultants. In that video I just posted to the chat there, Two different consultants, one of them being Glenn Singleton of Courageous Conversations fame, to advise and train people in the New York City public schools on what to do about inclusion and diversity and so on. Yeah, no, they're totally above board. There's something else I discovered that I probably should have known ahead of time, or maybe I did and I forgot. I was curious to find out what exactly is the statute of limitations on civil rights violations. So like if a company or an organization or whatever has done something or instituted a program or whatever that either implicitly or essentially violates someone's civil rights or could, you have, depending on whether you're talking federal or state issues, anywhere from 180 to 300 days to file a complaint. After that, it all goes by the wayside. So if all of these companies who are now shedding their DEI programs, at least rhetorically, and maybe doing some internal switching around, if they can just stay away from a lawsuit for the next year or thereabouts, then they come out clean. Which would be really, really unfortunate if that were true. But I guess we'll find out. Unfair Ophelia. Hi, Scribe and Chat. Hi, Unfair Ophelia. Cognus. Hello, cuties. Like Q-tippies. K. Shoal. Both here and over on the X Machine. Hello, K. Shoal. Hope you're doing well. Juliet. Good morning. Plague Trucker Zach. Good morning to you. Anybody I missed elsewise? I don't think so. I hope not. But hope everybody's doing well today. On to our next story. Let's talk about the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court gave Trump a bit of a win this past week. Supreme Court ruling allows Trump to cancel DEI teaching grants. Oh, good. The U.S. Supreme Court on Friday ruled the Trump administration can eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion grants primarily awarded to colleges and universities to train future teachers on DEI concepts. The 5-4 decision reversed an injunction by a federal court that had blocked, I think meant to be blocked, the U.S. Department of Education from its plans to halt the spending. In reporting on this news over the weekend, many mainstream news organizations' headlines only stated the ruling allows the Trump administration to eliminate teacher training grants and did not include the caveat that the cuts are focused on DEI. Yes, because of course, anything Trump does has to be reinterpreted to be the worst possible interpretation. Trump wants to take money away from teaching teachers. We're going to have dumber teachers because of Trump. Right. According to the Los Angeles Times, the California State University and the University of California lost 8 grants valued at about $56 million, quote, to recruit and train teachers to work in hard-to-staff schools in rural or urban areas. Oh, is that all it was? Oh. Quote, among the canceled programs was a $7.5 million grant to Cal State LA to train and certify 276 teachers over 5 years to work in high-need or high-poverty schools in the Los Angeles Unified and Pasadena Unified School Districts. Other cancellations included an $8 million program at UCLA to train at least 314 middle school principals, as well as math, English, science, and social science teachers to serve in several Los Angeles County school districts. Oh my gosh. He's taking away money to teach teachers how to be better teachers. However, the programs had come under scrutiny for being ideologically extreme as well as a waste of taxpayer dollars. The Education Department announced in February it was eliminating $600 million in funding to such programs. Quote, training materials included inappropriate and unnecessary topics such as critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion, social justice activism, anti-racism, and instruction on white privilege and white supremacy. Additionally, many of these grants included teacher and staff recruiting strategies implicitly and explicitly based on race, unquote, the Education Department stated in a news release. For example, education watchdog Christopher Rufo had reported in February on some of the programs funded through these efforts. Quote, I released material from an ongoing investigation into ideological corruption at the Department of Education and its sprawling NGO network. This material painted a damning picture of the department's reigning ideologies. In one video, a Department of Education-funded NGO argued that public school educators should destigmatize child, quote-unquote, sex work, especially for, quote, queer and trans people of color, and, quote, LGBTQ plus youth, unquote. In another, activists with a Department of Education affiliated NGO claim that babies develop racial biases and begin, quote, attributing negative traits, unquote, to non-white races by age 5. Now, how many times, just as an aside, how many times have we gone over videos on this channel where they keep making that statement? Did you know that children start noticing difference at ages 3 and 4? You have to start talking to them early so they don't have any racial biases, because that's when they notice difference. Because obviously difference equals hatred. Noticing difference, that means they're going to start becoming racists. I can't count how many times I've heard that same thing told to me. It's like, oh, well, obviously, all children are inherently racist as soon as they notice difference. It's kind of, in sort of an abstract way, it's the very underpinning of a lot of DEI arguments. If I see a disparity between demographics, therefore racism. We're continuing with Christopher Rufo's quote. And finally, I published a clip from an NGO that had received an $8 million grant to promote the idea that America is a, quote, radicalized structure of power, privilege, and oppression, unquote. I feel like Christopher Rufo and I have been running parallel to each other in highlighting different organizations and panel discussions and executives and stuff on this subject for a long time now. As for the ruling, the, quote, majority seemed to have little sympathy for the states, declaring that any ensuing irreparable harm would be of their own making if they chose not to fund the programs themselves, Politico reported, adding in the dissent, some justices worried yanking the grants so quickly will create havoc and harm. Yeah, havoc and harm to the DEI and CRT grifters out there. That's it. And also havoc and harm to quote-unquote educators who are fueled more by creating activists than educated students. But anyway, that is the end of the story there. So, yes, Trump does something, media spins it into the worst possible interpretation, and sort of hides the ball on exactly what's going on. Because teachers aren't there to, create thinkers and people who can think critically or know how to do their basic reading, writing, and arithmetic. No, they have to be change makers. They have to go forth and carry the message like evangelicals into the world of how much better it would be if we all just assessed each one another by the basis of our race or our gender. As we know, that's the better way for us all to interact with one another. Octopi invasion. Good morning. Anybody else I missed over on the X-Men? Jill Powers, the River Daughter. Good morning. Nice to see you again over from Midnight's Edge in the morning. But I did promise, speaking of Midnight's Edge in the morning, I did mention the fact that Al Sharpton is going to war with Pepsi. Imagine a giant Al Sharpton stomping through the streets of wherever Pepsi is headquartered and just smashing buildings. I am Al Sharpton. No. Al Sharpton calls on PepsiCo to restore DEI initiatives, threatens boycott. Ideologically speaking, I'm against Al Sharpton. Brand loyalty speaking, hey, boycott all the Pepsi you want. More Dr. Pepper for me. The Reverend Al Sharpton is giving PepsiCo 3 weeks to meet with him or suffer a boycott to discuss reversing the company's recent move to do away with its diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, according to a letter shared with the Associated Press. On Friday, Sharpton wrote the PepsiCo CEO Ramon Laguarta, expressing his, quote, profound disappointment, unquote, that the company would end inclusion commitments that both helped build its brand and fostered trust with millions of its customers. Yeah, because prior to, let's say, 2020, no one knew what Pepsi was. Had you guys ever heard of Pepsi before 2020? I know I hadn't, because its brand wasn't built until DEI came into the picture, right? Right. Quote, you have walked away from equity, Sharpton wrote in the letter. Well, you sold me. Maybe I need to go buy some Pepsi. Adding that removing DEI hiring and retention goals, you mean illegal quotas, and dismantling community partnerships with minority organizations, you mean giving money specifically to organizations and businesses on the basis of the race of their owners, quote, are clear signals that political pressure has outweighed principle. Or, finally, that the threat of consequences to violating civil rights laws and elsewise might actually be coming on the horizon. Sharpton, founder and president of the National Action Network, announced in January that the civil rights organization, yes, Al Sharpton, civil rights champion, would identify 2 companies in the next 90 days that will be boycotted for abandoning their DEI pledges. Oh man, how many Pepsi drinkers do you think Al Sharpton's going to be able to gather together to stop drinking Pepsi or PepsiCo products because they got rid of DEI? I'm going to have to follow this story. I'm really curious to know in the next 90 days. Holy cats, I got to keep an eye on this stuff. A spokesperson for PepsiCo said it had not received the letter and was unable to comment. PepsiCo is one of the largest food and beverage companies in North America. How can that be? It only just built its brand in the last 5 years because of DEI, right? Its brands include Gatorade, Lay's potato chips, Doritos, Mountain Dew, as well as Pepsi. Well, I'm sorry, guys. Al Sharpton has said no. That means every gamer on the planet is going to stop eating Doritos and drinking Mountain Dew starting, I guess, like right now. It's just going to happen. It's done. Al Sharpton spoke. And as we know, everybody that currently consumes Gatorade, Lay's potato chips, Doritos, Mountain Dew, and Pepsi knows who Al Sharpton is. I mean, yeah, he's so down with the kids, guys. You know, I mean, there's at this point, really, when it comes to like market share, there's Minecraft and then there's Al Sharpton, as we know. In a memo sent to employees in February, LaGuardia said that the company will no longer set goals for minority representation in its managerial roles or supplier base. Oh, you mean it will no longer make use of, potentially for legal purposes, illegal quotas in your hiring and supplier practices? So you're admitting that you had been previously. Since President Donald Trump returned to the White House earlier this year, U.S. government agencies, companies, and schools have scrambled to reevaluate policies and programs aimed at increasing diversity among its employees and reducing discrimination against members of minority groups, women, and LGBTQ plus people. You know, it's also wrong to discriminate in favor of someone on the basis of their demographic. I don't know if you guys, and I'm talking you guys as far as I'm talking about like corporate America and the press and elsewise, when it says you're not allowed to discriminate on the basis of these elements, it means both for and against. You always talk about the against, but you know, it's also not right to do for. Trump ended DEI programs within the federal government. Well, he's trying to. There's a whole bunch of pushback from different agencies, as I've covered previously, and has warned schools to do the same or risk losing federal money. Large retailers like Walmart and Target have also phased out DEI initiatives since Trump took office. Well, at least rhetorically. All of these companies, all of these institutions that are saying so, there really needs to be follow-up. There really, really needs to be follow-up. Following decades of activism and protests by marginalized groups, several pieces of legislation and executive orders in the 1960s laid the groundwork for what would become known today as the diversity, equity, and inclusion movement in the workplace. Wrong. Wrong. The movements of the 1960s are being used as an excuse, as a cover for what's happening in the workplace with DEI, but it is an absolute rejection of what was laid in the 1960s, groundwork-wise, for civil rights. It's a refutation of those things. But, of course, you don't know that or don't want to know that because nobody wants to be honest with themselves or anybody else about what DEI is really about and has been the entire time. In the 1970s, in response to the new laws and regulations, affirmative action policies were introduced, employee resource groups started to emerge, and businesses began implementing diversity trainings. This led to increased hiring of women and minorities. Right. Yes, affirmative action policies, which have now been, oh yeah, that's right, struck down by the Supreme Court, and should probably have been struck down 20, 25 years ago. Diversity trainings, which says what? Oh, that's right. White people are evil, minorities are inherent victims, and you have to feel bad about things people did before you were born. And this led to the increased hiring of women and minorities. Well, yeah, I mean, if you put quotas in place saying you have to hire people on the basis of their race or their sex, then yeah, you're going to see an increase in hiring. You say this as though it's an inherent good thing without thinking about what the mechanisms were that led to it and how that squares with the very civil rights laws you are lauding as the foundation of all of this. By the 1980s, new studies began highlighting the business incentive for fostering inclusive workplaces. Really? Focus shifted from compliance with the law. Let's take in the beginning of that sentence for a second. Focus shifted from compliance with the law to, quote, creating an environment where everybody feels that they can achieve their highest goal, unquote, said Mary Frances Winters, an author and strategist focused on diversity and organizational development. Quote, this was really about looking at changing demographics, looking at who was coming into the workforce, and also looking at how people with different backgrounds can lead to greater innovation, Winters said. How about just setting a standard of merit and excellence in your work and never minding what someone looks like? I know actual egalitarianism is an alien concept to these guys. Research continued to emphasize that diversity in the workplace was a matter of business survival, with some businesses even beginning to mandate cultural competency within leadership. Yeah, hey, corporate CEO, are you down with the Hispanics? Do you know what they like? Or the black people? Because let's make assumptions about somebody on the basis of their race or ethnicity to have cultural competency. Because obviously anybody with a similar skin color has the same culture. You know, a white guy from Texas and a white guy from Romania. It's practically the same thing, as you know. PepsiCo was one of those companies, Sharpton pointed out in his letter. In the 1940s and 50s, PepsiCo hired some of the first black sales and marketing executives in corporate America. Sharpton wrote, really? The 40s and 50s? That's way before the civil rights movement. Golly, it's way before DEI. How is that possible? How is it possible that they did that? And by the 1980s, the company's policies led to the creation of black consumer advisory boards. Okay, so focus groups. What does that have to do with hiring or promotion practices that violate Title VII? Tell me true. I mean, having a focus group focused on a particular demographic for sales and marketing is fine. That's not what the issue is. It's about hiring people or not hiring people on the basis of their race or their gender to fulfill an illegal quota, which PepsiCo has already all but admitted they were doing up to this point. Quote, you did this not because it was easy, but because it was right, Sharpton wrote in the letter. That legacy is now in jeopardy, unquote. No, it's not. They were doing it because they were hiring people because they had the skills and ability to do the job. Unless they were operating under a quota system back in the 1940s and 50s. Were they? PepsiCo's announcement in February that it would roll back inclusion efforts came as Coca-Cola reaffirmed support for its DEI efforts. Oh boy, you go Coca-Cola. In its annual report, Atlanta-based Coke warned that the inability to attract employees that reflect its broad range of customers could negatively affect its business. Okay, so you're going to continue on with hiring quotas on the basis of demographic split? All right. Quote, failure to maintain a corporate culture that fosters innovation, collaboration, and inclusion could disrupt our operations and adversely affect our business and our future success, the company said. It could, or it will. Well, I guess stick to it and see what happens. I'm sure it'll all work out in the end. Dexter's Lab, marginalized groups aren't necessarily the persons for the job either. I think people swing the other direction a little too hard sometimes too. I'm against DEI mandates and hiring though, to be clear. Yeah, if a company explicitly says they're hiring people because of what they look like, they're out the door as far as I'm concerned. Hire people on the basis of what they can do, what they're able to do. If they have a particular knowledge, a particular skill, a particular education, experience and so on, great. But it's like, well, we have to have, 50% women in our executive team by 2027. No. I mean, you can't eliminate bias and discrimination entirely, right? Even if a company has absolutely no stated incentives or goals or policies regarding it, if somebody in HR has a bias towards someone because of what they look like, unless they put it down on paper and unless you can prove it, it might still happen. But having these explicit, no consequence policies and procedures and initiatives in companies and organizations that don't even care about the existing law. And we saw this kind of, through the hoops kind of thinking in this article here, where they're talking about, in the 1960s, they established the foundation for DEI. Just ignoring what DEI actually does. Actually listen to DEI advocates and supporters about what they say. How do they measure success? How do they spot a problem in a company? It's all very simple. It's right there. They haven't been lying about it when you actually listen to what they have to say. As veterans of my channel know, if you give a DEI advocate enough time to speak, eventually they will start telling you the truth after they run out of corporate speak. Sadistic atheist, hiring the best person for the job. It isn't an act of exclusion or racism. It's the right thing to do for the health of the company. No, yeah. You start putting qualifiers on whether the right thing to do is hire someone because of their particular color or gender. Well, that's just called pity. That's just undermining someone. That's condescension. How many times have we seen articles and headlines and things to say, first black somebody has been appointed to this thing, and no name is mentioned? I can't count how many times I've seen those headlines on Twitter and the news and elsewise. You see some headline says, first whatever, fill in the blank demographic, appointed to this position or elected to that position. No name, because their identity doesn't matter. Who they are doesn't matter. What they are is all that is valued. Is that the society we've been working towards this entire time? Is that what the civil rights movement of the 60s was working towards? No. 100% no. And yet they keep trying to backwards confabulate all that stuff into being part of the civil rights movement of the 60s? It's insane. Hoko Sports, who I don't think is insane, mandated hiring on race used to be Jim Crow. I know. Can you imagine if there was a sign out that said, whites only for diversity? Can you imagine the reaction people would have to a sign out there for hiring on that basis? And you know what? Their reaction, their outrage, would be correct. And yet, if you say something like this, oh, well, we hired for minorities and women, that's okay. I mean, we still hired on the basis of race or ethnicity or gender. If you had a sign out there that said, white men only to be hired, you'd have a panic. But oh well. What's good for the goose, right? Moving on to our next story. Let's see. This one I meant to do in the last episode, but I ran out of time. But let's talk about the EEOC, the Equal Employment and Opportunity Commission. The chief of said commission shifts focus to investigating DEI, but the methods provoke an outcry. Okay, so this is where the agency that should have been following up on this stuff all these years is now doing so. But, and I'm asking sincerely because I don't know, are they overstepping or doing something non-productive? Let's see. The acting chief of the top federal agency for protecting worker rights has signaled a pivot towards prioritizing President Donald Trump's campaign to stamp out diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in the private and public sectors. The initial steps taken by Andrea Lucas, acting chief of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, have earned her strong backing from the Trump administration, which has moved against DEI through embattled executive orders that dismantled programs at federal agencies and threatened investigations and stiff financial penalties for federal contractors that engage in quote-unquote illegal diversity-related practices. Trump recently nominated Lucas, who has long been an outspoken critic of DEI practices. She argues result in discriminatory employment preferences to a new 5-year term as commissioner. I'm very glad that someone is leading the charge here who seemingly knows what she's talking about. But former Democratic EEOC officials If there's anybody that has already lost credibility with me when it comes to EEOC operations and enforcement, it's anyone in former Democratic realms. Because I think those were the guys in charge the last 4 years and previous that allowed all this stuff to happen. But former Democratic EEOC officials and prominent civil rights groups have accused Lucas of taking shortcuts that supersede her authority, and they have urged employers to be wary of her directives and guidance, if not altogether ignore them. You mean if not to altogether ignore them? Okay. The most recent flashpoint involves 2 technical assistance documents issued by the EEOC along with the Department of Justice attempting to clarify what might constitute, quote, DEI-related discrimination at work, unquote, and providing guidance on how workers can file complaints over such concerns. What might constitute? Is any program or activity in your business geared towards preferencing people on the basis of their race, gender, or orientation? Or ethnicity. Add that one in there. Do you have any hiring targets that deal with such? Do you have any internal company programs or organizations that segregate employees on the basis of these elements at all? That might be something to look at. I mean, it's kind of in there. Title VII, it's been there a while now. The documents take broad aim at practices such as training, employee resource groups. I got to do something on ERGs again. I got to see if there's any latest coverage or conversation on ERGs after all the Trump stuff. I keep saying that, but I really need to do that soon. And fellowship programs, warning such programs, depending on how they're constructed, could run afoul of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits employment discrimination based on race and gender. Well, if you have an employee resource group that's just for Hispanic employees, if you have one that's just for black employees, I don't know how much more of a hint you need. The documents followed letters that Lucas sent to 20 prominent law firms demanding information about diversity fellowships and other programs she claimed could be evidence of discriminatory practices. Oh, like O'Melveny and Myers, a law firm I've covered before. Their programs were demonstrably discriminatory. A group of 10 former Democratic commissioners and counsels released its own letter Thursday warning the legal community the DEI documents give the misleading impression that common programs, quote, are fraught with legal peril, unquote, and dismissed them as reflecting Lucas's personal opinion. Common programs. Okay, are they? Does commonality equal legal? I mean, everybody's doing it, so it must be legal? Or everybody's doing it, but nobody's actually come back at us about it because there hasn't been any enforcement over the last 10 years of existing laws, so that must mean what? The letter offered counter-guidance on how employers should continue implementing training and other practices the EEOC policy documents encourage to prevent discrimination. Last month, 7 of the same former EEOC officials sent Lucas a letter warning that she appeared to exceed her authority with her demands for information from the 20 law firms without first launching a formal investigation. Okay, so it's a procedural complaint. All right. A group of prominent civil rights organizations went a step further in their own letter to Lucas, urging the law firms to ignore her demands because they have no legal obligation to reply. Well, to reply to the letter, maybe not. But if the EEOC is actually staffed correctly and resourced correctly, and it comes into your organization that is an employer in the United States and finds that you've been engaging in discriminatory hiring or training or other practices, okay. I mean, if nothing else, she at least gave you a warning. Quote, this isn't how the EEOC works. No single commissioner, not even the chair, has the authority to send threatening letters demanding private information from employers, unquote, said Noreen Farrell, director of Equal Rights Advocates, one of the civil rights organizations that signed into the response, led by the National Women's Law Center. Quote, the EEOC chair can't just rewrite decades of settled civil rights law with a hastily written memo, unquote. Well, if anybody should be in the know as to whether or not she exceeded her authority, I guess it would be you lawyers, so if she has, file a lawsuit. I mean, I'm all for the testing of what has or has not been accepted as practice when it comes to these things. That's what the system is for. So if she is exceeding her authority in some way, then fight it and rein it in. But I just hope the EEOC takes note of what these companies and organizations are doing and actually does their job. Because again, as I've said, it's one thing for EEOC and Trump and all the federal agencies to talk big about enforcement and consequences. But until I see some consequences, it's all just smoke. Jenny Yang, a former EEOC commissioner under former President Barack Obama, I'm sure this is going to be enlightening, said Lucas's letters to the 20 law firms were without precedent at the EEOC. Does lack of precedent mean wrong? Which initiates most investigations in response to complaints filed by workers. In very rare cases, a commissioner can file their own charge against an employer, but it wouldn't be made public and would require the commissioner to provide evidence of possible discrimination under penalty of perjury, Yang said. Well, I'll tell you what, as far as most of these companies are concerned, the evidence you need of possible discrimination is their DEI programs and statements over the last decade. Pepsi, as an example, they all but said in no uncertain terms that they've been practicing quotas prior to all this, quotas that dealt with minority and female representation. So there's your evidence. If you've got a law firm that's been actively promoting and advertising themselves as having minority and female and LGBTQ plus internships, well, there's your evidence. The companies themselves, here's the thing. DEI has taken what might be assumed or conspiracy theorized discrimination in companies and organizations and just brought it out to the public and just stood there loud and proud and said, yes, we are DEI supporters, and here's our numbers, and here's our percentages, and here's how many people we have of this particular demographic versus that particular demographic year over year. They're telling you, they've been telling us for years now exactly what they're doing. It just, no one's done anything about it. And it's been cheered on or looked past. That's the problem. Law firms, including some of the 20 targeted by Lucas, are already coming under pressure to change their approach to diversity and inclusion in response to separate Trump executive orders designed to punish them for taking on the president's rivals as clients and other actions that have angered him. Yeah, those ones are a little, admittedly, very sketchy at best. For example, Skadden, Arps, Slate, Megan, and Flom recently learned that the president intended to issue an order targeting it over its pro bono legal work and its diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. The firm has consequently agreed to review its hiring practices, among other things. Well, why should it? I mean, none of these law firms are doing anything wrong, right? The 20 law firms targeted in Lucas's letter did not respond to questions from the Associated Press about whether they intended to respond to her demands. Lucas did not respond to requests for comment on the DEI technical assistance documents, and the EEOC declined to say whether the law firms have any legal obligation to respond to her letters or whether they would face any penalty for not doing so. I'd be surprised if they could receive a penalty for not responding to the letter, but it might be a heads up to change your ways or an investigation is coming. But Lucas, a Republican who was first appointed to the EEOC in 2020, has long argued that she is not reinterpreting civil rights laws, but rather sounding the alarm that many companies have adopted DEI practices that cross the line into discrimination. Exactly. The civil rights laws are the civil rights laws. We're not talking new law here. Lucas has argued the EEOC has turned a blind eye to risky company practices, which she said proliferated especially after the 2020 racial justice protests that followed the police killing of George Floyd. Quote, far too many employers defend certain types of race or sex preferences as good, provided they are motivated by business interests in diversity, equity, or inclusion, Lucas said in a statement, announcing the new technical assistance on DEI. Many employers are likely to take heed of her warnings as the EEOC signals that it will become a powerful ally to workers claiming discrimination stemming from DEI practices. And that's what really needs to happen and happen more quickly. And I'm wondering what has happened in the past when it comes to these potential complaints. The EEOC can't really act unless there's a complaint by a worker. But I would argue, as I've said before, the blatant company announcements of their intentions and their goals should be more than enough to open up an investigation into so many of these companies. It's not a matter of some one disgruntled employee or person who wasn't hired that says something. DEI is a declaration of suspicion. And it always has been and should certainly be now. Anuradha Hebar, president of CEO Action for Inclusion and Diversity, an arm of the influential Society for Human Resource Management, said the EEOC has especially makes clear. You mean especially made clear? AP, do you need like an editor or something? Has especially makes clear that companies should avoid fellowships, internships, and other programs that are only open to women or certain racial groups. Yes, you should avoid those because they're inherently discriminatory. Stefan Padfield of conservative think tank National Center for Public Policy Research praised the EEOC's The Shift. This is hurting my brain to read now. Praised the EEOC's The Shift as a much-needed course correction that will open the floodgates for complaints against DEI practices that should be deemed illegal, as long as they happen soon, because between 180 to 300 days after the fact, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a lot tougher. Lucas has acknowledged that she cannot unilaterally change some of the agency's guidelines and policies that may contradict Trump's slew of executive orders, though the EEOC has already moved to drop 7 lawsuits alleging discrimination against transgender and non-binary people in response to a presidential order declaring the government would only recognize the male and female genders. Ooh, now there's a consequence I hadn't thought about. Changing such policies, including the EEOC's 5-year strategic enforcement plan that pledges support for DEI, would require a majority vote by the agency's 5 commissioners. But Trump recently fired 2 of those commissioners, both Democrats, before their terms expired in a move that upended 60 years of precedent for an agency established by Congress as independent and bipartisan. It's been a pass-through for this stuff for years. You know, if only the EEOC had actually done their jobs these last decade or more, DEI wouldn't have even gotten off the ground. In their letter Thursday, the former EEOC officials accused Lucas of cherry-picking rare instances of discrimination. Oh my God, you guys. To convey the message that training and other DEI practices are inherently risky when in fact most are legally sound. I've got a channel full of evidence to the contrary. These former EEOC officials have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, or they're outright being dishonest. There's just no 2 ways about it. Company after company, organization after organization. Diversity quotas, or racially charged metrics, goals and institutions and programs and everything completely based around race, gender, orientation, on and on and on and on again. Give me a break. Quote, our federal civil rights offices and officials should not be intimidating or discouraging employers who are working to advance these goals, the letter said. The goals are illegal. The goals violate civil rights law, established civil rights law. Title VII, Title VI, it's right there. It baffles me how these guys keep pretending like somehow they're on the right side of this. They're not. They never have been. Twisted Skipster scribbles turns into a snake. Duck Dog. Society for Human Resource Management sounds like the robot apocalypse. Yeah. That's the Matrix. That's where they're turning everybody into batteries. Human Resource Management. Okay, and one more story before we wind down. Walmart. Another boycott, guys. It's coming. Walmart boycott over DEI looming when it ends. What to avoid during economic blackout. That is a very full headline. Let's find out what we're talking about here. Coming off the heels of a nationwide Target boycott. How did that do, by the way? How much damage did Target face as a result of that boycott? Consumers are planning another spending freeze. How many consumers? Like 2? That would get you to the plural. This time against Walmart in response to the retailer scaling back its diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. The week-long Walmart blackout is spearheaded by the People's Union USA. Never heard of it. The group behind the 24-hour economic blackout that urged against shopping at Nestle, Amazon, Target, and other companies that abandoned DEI practices. And as we all know, those 3 companies are now bankrupt. Yeah, DEI was really the only thing holding those companies up, guys. Nestle, Amazon, and Target, they're toast. As we know. Here's what to know about the upcoming Walmart boycott. I can't wait. The upcoming Walmart boycott is April 7th through 14th, lasting a full week. Well, heck, that starts today. You know, I'm sure that by the 14th, Walmart will have DEI back online. I betcha. Customers are asked to avoid spending at Walmart or any of its affiliates, including Walmart Pharmacy and Health, Sam's Club online apps, and more. What's being boycotted in the upcoming Walmart blackout? I think it was just explained. Boycott by not spending your money at any of the things. Okay, why is there a Walmart boycott? Performative tantrum throwing. John Schwartz, the creator of the grassroots movement, the People's Union USA, again, never heard of it, never heard of him, has criticized major corporations like Walmart, Target, and Amazon, even calling Walmart, quote, one of the most exploitative companies in the country on Instagram. Quote, we the people will no longer fund companies that poison our food, pollute our planet, and play political games with our lives, unquote, Schwartz added. Unless they heel to your demands and then you'll spend your money at them? Is that it? The nation's largest retailer and private employer rolled back its DEI policies after conservative pressure as Walmart announced it would not renew a racial equity center it created following the 2020 murder of George Floyd. Because again, guys, as we know, a man dying in police custody in Minneapolis has implications for corporate hiring and employee retention initiatives nationwide. I've never understood it either. There you go. The company also announced it would no longer participate in an annual benchmark index for LGBTQ plus advocacy group, the Human Rights Campaign, according to USA Today. Yes, because the Human Rights Campaign just promotes illegal quotas. That's the core of it. It's just one giant guilt trip to make you hire people on the basis of their orientation and or race and or ethnicity. So, how many Walmart stores are in Ohio? I don't know. 138 apparently. Okay. More boycotts are planned against Walmart, Amazon, McDonald's, and more. The Arizona Republic reports that Schwartz outlined future dates for upcoming boycotts. You know what they didn't tell us in here? How many people are recorded as being members of this People's Union USA? Like how many people does that actually comprise? Is it 2? Is it 1? Let's see. I don't know. Real quick, I want to finally see membership. Let's see. People's using membership. Yeah. Do they have any numbers? They don't really have any numbers. Not that I see immediately. So, I'm assuming it's at least 2. At least, I'll grant them that possibility. Let's see. Over in the chat. This just in, YouTuber Scribelight, known for keeping his audience informed on current events, especially through a segment called DEI Deathwatch, was found deceased in his home Monday morning, having passed away amidst a live stream addressing DEI issues. Authorities believe he passed away from a stroke resulting from reading an Associated Press article with numerous grammatical errors. It has happened or almost happened several times in the past. My brain gets scrambled when I just can't read something and it just makes me go, Duck Dog, commie bullshit. This reeks of commie bullshit. It reeks of just like some fringe group said, we're not going to buy from Walmart anymore. And like, oh my gosh, this is a news story. They're demanding a boycott. I'm sure it'll be as effective as Al Sharpton and Pepsi. Yeah, Pepsi's toast, guys. Pepsi's going out of business. Walmart's going out of business. It started today, guys, the Walmart boycott. So just wait. In 2 weeks, starting today, Walmart will be bankrupt. The losses will be catastrophic for Walmart because of this boycott. I'm telling you, it's coming. Dr. Functional, I've always said Scribbles is too good for this. Aww. But you're all like sort of dancing on the idea that I've passed away from, testosterone or something here. Anyway, sadistic atheist, Nestle going bankrupt would be a good thing. Surely your chocolate tastes like vomit. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I mean, I don't really eat chocolate bars anymore, like hot cocoa, like actual chocolate. Yeah. Or that like soup. I mean, it's too expensive. I don't get it that often. It's usually too rich. But like the super dark chocolate, that chocolate that's just to the point of almost being sour. It's so rich. Oh, only once in a blue moon though. Not as a habit. Can't do that. But anyway, everybody, that is DEI Deathwatch for today. Your digest of the declination. Looking for another D word. Declination and doubling down of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And by the way, did you know I have another D word Discord server? Link to the Discord server is in the chat right now, guys. If you'd like to join the Discord server, just click on that link. You'll find yourself on the landing channel called Say Hello. And in addition to saying hello, you just have to say the secret word. The secret word will tell me that you're not a bot, have actually watched the stream, and have thus earned the right, the privilege, the entitlement to join the Discord server. And today's secret word is boycott. Just say hello, boycott, and I'll know that you watch the show. Also, you can find me here Thursday nights at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for TED Excellence, where I'll take a look at another off-brand TED Talk for information and education and entertainment and a whole bunch of other things. Just like last week where we learned, can dogs sign a contract for research participation? Or, speaking of Coco, can AI save Coco? I don't know. I guess we'll find out with whatever I choose for this week. And boy, there's a whole bunch of things to choose from. But other than that, I'd like to thank anybody who came over from Midnight's Edge. As I understood it, they were going to send people over this direction after that show wrapped up. And also tomorrow, for those of you that I was going to send you from here over to the Latino Slant show, but Polly had to move that till tomorrow because of scheduling stuff. So be sure to check out Latino Slant tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. Yes, I get my times right there. Where he'll talk about Jenna Ortega and other entertainment news involving a Latino slant. But everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things, even though everyone here is so well behaved. You have very, very little to do. Everybody who donated either to myself or to the the Give, Send, Go fundraiser at the top of the chat box. Thank you guys so much for your generosity. Very much appreciate it. If you leave a like on the way out, I'd like that. And if you don't, that's fine, but I hope you come back next time. And everyone, I hope you have a good rest of your Monday. Hope you have a good rest of your week ahead of you. Hope you're all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.